Welcome everyone to another chai time. This is our second chai time to date, and with us today we have Neha Govindraj. She is a repeat founder, entrepreneur. She's currently joining us from New York, but I think she lives in Chicago full time. And she started her first company, Glowbar, and scaled that. And a lot of people who are in New York or some of the New York area, I believe, might have seen the massive, beautiful branding and signs. It's about fixing your skin. I'm gonna mess up the pitch, but Glow Bar essentially lets you get the best facial possible, the most efficient facial possible. And I use it. A lot of my friends use it. She built that business, saw pain points in how a lot of these companies that are growing quickly kind of need help raising capital and may not be the best fit for the traditional types of VC fundraisers that you see on Twitter. And so she said, okay, I think I have an idea for a new business. And so then she started Bonside. So she's on company number 2, super young. And I've known Neha. I'm lucky to have known her since I was in high school. And so I'm very excited for this full circle moment where I get to interview one of my favorite people. So I will kick it off to you.
I love that. Well, you're one of my favorite people back, so I am thrilled that you are having me on here. I think you covered it. I think you covered sort of the journey that's brought me to where I am right now.
Amazing. So we'd love to kind of just start by learning more about your background. I mean, I gave you some high level. I've known you for a while, but for everyone else, just if you could talk about your background, how you got to the point you are today, maybe like how you grew up, your childhood, where you went to school, all the accomplishments that we've posted on her bio data that you can mint. But if you could just talk us through like your original journey from childhood, that would be amazing.
Yeah, of course. So grew up in South Florida alongside you. And Maya and I went to the same high school, which is called Pinecrest, in, again, the South Florida area. And after Pinecrest, I moved to Evanston, where I went to Northwestern. And while I was at Northwestern, studied econ and computer science, which was a ton of fun, lots of learnings packed in that. I think pretty early on, I sort of had the entrepreneur bug, knew I wanted to build something. And as I was approaching my junior year internship, I was looking at sort of, it was a time when the Warbies and the Birchboxes of the world were all coming to light. And I was looking at the background of these founders. So I was like, what did they do? What was their career path? Because I want to be like them. And they all had this overlap in that they worked at this company called Bain. And I saw that and I was like, no idea what that is, but I too want to work at Bain. And I just applied to Bain. I didn't know the whole consulting thing or anything like that. And then ended up interning there my junior year summer and then went back full time after my senior year. Before going back full time, I had graduated early and was a sales operations intern at a Chicago startup called Brideside. They're unfortunately no longer around, but while I was there, I was, packing, but I was doing the traditional intern things. And that's again where I was like, yep, love this life. Can't wait to ultimately do this one day. Was at Bain for a couple of years working in their private equity group and their consumer practice. Really, I went to Bain to become a better decision maker. And I feel like in the years that I was there, it really did that for me. And then that's when I started Glowbar. In between, I did a 6-month externship at Glossier too. That was awesome. It was early on. They were Series A, and I was working with the exec team there on just strategy, and it was very cool exposure. But yeah, then started Glowbar, went through that. Was
Amazing.
There for a few years.
I'm gonna pause you there because there's a lot to unpack. So number one on Bain, who else is from Bain? Because it seems like it's driven a lot of winners. I don't even know about that whole story.
Yeah, there was, I'm going to totally forget now, but the Warby Parker founders were, the Birchbox founder was, and then there was this clothing brand that I was obsessed with that was there's this, I forget the name of the company now, but they incubated a bunch of D2C brands and they were ex-Bain. It's a pretty deep network. Andy Dunn, he was ex-Bain. So yeah, lots of folks.
Super interesting. And then How was your experience at Glossier? I remember that was right when Glossier was like, no, I mean, maybe they were Series A, but they were just getting on the map. Like when you
Yeah.
told me about that internship, I was like, oh my God, she's in the scene.
It's so funny. I was like a big Into the Gloss reader before Glossier became a company, so I'd been following the brand forever. And I at Bain, you can spend 6 months while you're there working at another company, and then you come back to Bain. And it's their way. It's a great retention tool, honestly, because a lot of folks will do the externship and then realize that they really like being at Bain and they'll stay there.
Wow, that's surprising.
Yeah, it's interesting. And then
Okay.
sometimes it has the reverse effect, right?
Right.
Where you love it and then you
Yeah.
decide to jump, which is what happened to me. But yeah, the externship I did there was awesome. I knew I wanted to be at the company. There was someone else who had been in being extern there before me, so I reached out to her, and she had worked directly for the COO at the time, and so she connected me to him, and he was like, "Yeah, come on board for 6 months. There's plenty of work to get done." And so really, I spent like it was sort of did all sorts of things while I was there for 6 months, just sort of like mapping out different projects that just helped kind of put out fires that the company was facing at the time.
Yeah. I'm curious. So, I mean, your first company, I want to spend most of the time talking about Bonside, but your first company, Glowbar, I'm curious what your learnings from Glossier, or if there were any learnings kind of at that experience, especially since you were an Into the Gloss reader, which I didn't know. So like around brand, consumer, what did you take from that externship experience for your first business?
Totally. I think Glossier did a brilliant job of just creating a roadmap of how to build a brand and how to build consumer and community. They really spearheaded that movement. And
Yeah.
I think what was really awesome was when I was building Glowbar, I could reflect, even if I wasn't the one leading the conversation at Glossier, I heard the conversations, I saw how it came to life. And being able to sort of, when building Glowbar, be able to feel like, okay, yes, I feel like we're going in the right direction because the process that we're doing here mirrors some of the processes we were doing at Glossier.
Yeah.
And I think it was extra essential for me because when you come out of consulting or finance, you actually haven't had the experience of operating within a business before.
Yeah.
And so there's so much, even small things that you don't know and you have to ramp up quickly on. And so what was nice about for me having Glossier was, one, it was just experience operating in a company. And so even if they had been a chair company, it would have been relevant to what I was doing at Glowbar. But the fact that they were also kind of this beauty business that was building brand loyalty and community just made it that much more transferable in terms of skill set. So
Yeah.
there's no specific one thing. I think it was just like in everything we approached, I leaned on those experiences.
It's really interesting. Like some of these internship and externship experiences, it's like sometimes they're turning points in your career and you don't realize it in the moment. Like you could be getting coffee, but you're exposed to certain people who think a certain way or have a certain culture, and you start picking up these things because you're usually younger, so you're more malleable to their ideas. I think there is like crazy value in, I mean, the externship, because you already came in with having skills versus just doing coffee. But I think a lot of times I see a lot of younger people like pushing for paid work or like side hustles, but there's really a lot of value to being just fly on the ear and some sort of intern. At least me personally, I'm seeing from your story, like I've learned some of the best skills by being an intern. So don't dock the unpaid internship. Don't cancel me for saying that. Okay, cool. So I'd love to hear, I guess, Glowbar was your first company. So what it was like, and just high level, like what are some things, on this chai time session, something we're trying to do is not be too general about, everyone reads blogs about what it takes to be a founder and how to start a business, but something we really like doing is like sharing a story or moment from, starting your first thing that was really tough that you had to navigate or figure out, to just give people a sense of what it actually is like, no BS. So if you have, any tidbits around the Glowbar journey, that would be super helpful.
Totally. There's so many, right? I think every day poses truly building a company. What I realized in building Glowbar was really a roller coaster. Like there would be days where I really felt on top of the world and so confident in everything we were doing and I was doing. And then there were days where you had the exact opposite feeling, where as an entrepreneur, it's so easy to feel small because you just don't have a brand name on your back. And so there's so much oscillating between the two. I think if I had to think back to a specific experience, I mean, the one that comes to mind is for sure the first few days of COVID, where we were a brick and mortar business, and COVID was starting to become rampant in New York City. And we were operating a business where we were seeing many clients a day and touching their face and, really, really close. And now it's so crazy to think about that. But we had to make the decision that we were going to close our doors. And we did that before we made that decision, I think like 3 to 4 days before the government mandated it. And so it was that, like, no one was telling us to close our doors. And we were just like, oh, this is a thing we have to do because we care about our team and the safety of them. And we didn't want to ask them to go on the subway and then meet with, 50 people in a given day. And so we made the decision to close our doors for 2 weeks. And there was a lot that came with that of, the 2 weeks obviously spread into a handful of months. But there was so many decisions that we had to make around that because, we weren't this business that was flush with VC capital, that we just had all this runway that we could continue to pay folks as we closed doors. And so navigating that, now there's so much structure on exactly how to navigate that and how to even communicate it. But none of that existed. I remember I leveraged some connections we had to get in front of like one of the best lawyers for employment law. And they were just like, I have no idea. I have no idea what to tell you. And we were just like, okay, I guess we just really have to just like figure this out and hope we're doing it right. And that was like the hardest, like I would say just like 48 hours of like, no one knew, no one knew how to actually handle that situation of closing doors and furlough. No one knew what the word furlough was. We all learned it together.
Oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah, I mean, imagine hearing the word as an employer furlough for the first time, and then you're expected to do that action. There's like so many questions around like, is this even a real word? Like, I'm the first person to actually go do this thing. Like, what does this even mean? Is this legal? Like, you just have no idea.
Right.
But people's livelihoods are at stake. So yeah, I think that was the hardest for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the crazy part of doing a startup specifically. Like the name suggests, you're doing net new things. And so there is no rule book. And I think just getting that muscle trained is something, I think that's like the make or break between someone who can be a career entrepreneur like you are versus people who kind of churn away. It's like being able and being so comfortable with there is no rule book, go figure it out, and having the confidence in yourself to say, I don't care, this is a new industry, I'm going to figure it out, which leads me into Bonside now. And so I've obviously known you well, so I can kind of speak with a lot of bias, but you have become this advocate for brick and mortar, especially in the tech community, and the tools you're building at Bonside, a lot, the messaging you're doing, no one has really come at it the way you have before. So in a way, it seems really similar to your COVID furlough experience where you're early to a trend. And so I would love to kind of use this time to now segue into the why behind Bonside to start, and then we can talk through, if you're open to it, some of the challenges around being new in a space and having to define and create that narrative for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the why behind Bonside, the why behind Bonside is funny because I think it's actually even higher level than what we're doing day to day. When I think about what our sole mission is, it's really to elevate brick and mortar. If you think about brick and mortar, it has been around since like the beginning of commerce, right? There's just always been corners for it. Like, it's just something that's just carried the test of time. Mm-hmm. And what was wild to me in building Glowbar was, I'm opening these new locations. They're performing so well, and there is no obvious centralized source of capital for me to continue scaling my cash flow positive business. And while I have friends that are building tech companies and are having conversations around Series A, Series B with negative cash flows, I'm sitting here looking at small business banking loans with personal guarantees, merchant cash advances with really high interest rates. Like, why are these options so low tier? And why do they send a negative signal about my business?
Right.
And I think that's what frustrated me was, wait, this is crazy. We've actually, in prioritizing tech and celebrating tech, we've accidentally deprioritized and stopped celebrating every other business. And as a result, it's almost like the golden star is go after tech. And if you're doing anything else, like, yikes. And I think that frustrated me because I was like, wait, we're creating physical experiences. We're having a lot of impact here. There's so much we're actually changing and driving. We are innovating. And I think every brick and mortar owner feels that way. They wouldn't be spending their time doing what they're doing if that wasn't true. And so in creating Bonside, we're starting with this wedge of financing of, hey, let's go in with a thing that these businesses really need, which is just a reliable source of capital that actually makes sense for their business, and then start to give them everything else that they need in order to make their business as strong as possible. But the approach that we're taking to doing that is one that elevates them in the process and actually celebrates them for what they're doing and doesn't feel like a second tier option or like the option of last resort.
That's super interesting when you're saying that tech is like the golden child, but how big is even the opportunity in brick and mortar? Because a lot of times I think people, you only see the news headlines of tech companies raising a ton of money. So I'm curious, I'm sure you did this market sizing, but like how big is this, not to be a VC, but I am, but like how big is the market opportunity for brick and mortar to kind of service this whole category?
Yeah, I mean, there's $12 trillion of market value rooted in industries that are brick and mortar industries. That's insane. I mean, just think about like when you step outside. When you step outside, you are just facing so many, like your grocery store, your hair salon, your clothing store, your cafe, your pet boarding center. Like there's just brick and mortar at every single turn. It's massive. It's huge.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And so, how was it? So this time around, you're a solo founder. So how has it been? I mean, what did you actually do to get started on this business? You had the idea, you saw the opportunity. What was your tangible kind of next step to get this going?
Yeah. The first thing I did was I built a pitch deck. I think the natural audience I had in mind was probably venture in building that, if I think back to that, but it was with no plans of building a pitch deck for a meeting that I had. I had no meetings, hadn't spoken to anyone about it. I just kind of ran the idea by a couple of peers and just said, hey, this is generally like what I'm thinking. I think there's a massive opportunity here that I really want to go chase. And got a couple, like enough people that were like, this is really interesting. Like, I'm so curious. I have so many other questions. That I then took a step back and said, let me just build a pitch deck. And the purpose of that was to pitch myself. Like, am I bought into this? Like,
You're such a consultant. You're such a Bain consultant.
And by the way, I like made it pretty. Like it was like I took the time to make sure everything was left aligned. And I mean, that part was probably not a good use of time, but I was like, if I'm going to convince myself, I've got a high bar, so I'm going to make it pretty. So I built the pitch deck for myself and I looked at it and I was like, am I like excited about this? Like when I close this pitch deck and go to bed, do I wake up wanting to open it again? And obviously the answer was yes. And then I called a founder friend, and I was like, I think I'm going to go fundraise. Like, I think I'm going to build this. And they were like, I think you should absolutely go fundraise, and I will be your first 25K check-in.
Wow.
And not having a co-founder, that was what I needed to actually get started, was someone being like, I'll put my money where my mouth is. I think you should build this. And so then I decided to go fundraise and did that round. And then, once you raise capital, then you got to get to work.
Oh my God. And so, I mean, how has it been? Well, first of all, I find that it's not ironic, but it's just funny that you have to go pitch to, maybe not funny for you, but it's just interesting that you have to go pitch to VCs, a business that is around brick and mortar and helping that industry and elevating that industry where that's clearly in a lot of cases not their priority. So I'm curious, what's been that experience like? Just you're selling into tech and a lot of your early users are tech. How do you actually, and I'm sure you're figuring this out still because you're brand new, but how do you actually get them to have buy-in on brick and mortar as this $12 trillion opportunity?
Yeah. I feel this way about, I mean, everything, like women in STEM, like being a minority, being like elevating brick and mortar is, I really believe in pulling a seat up to the table. And I've always believed that. And what I knew I didn't want to do was sort of pit the two against one another. I was like, if I want buy-in, if I want brick and mortar to be celebrated, I want VC buy-in on celebrating brick and mortar. And my business can raise from VC because my business isn't a brick and mortar business.
Right.
And so what I knew was I really wanted to have VCs behind what we were doing because it was a really great signal to brick and mortars too. And it in turn elevates them of, hey, brick and mortar business, you're getting financed by Bonside, which is who's backed by so-and-so. And that actually feels really strong to the brick and mortar owner of, okay, I've got this financial business backing me and they're backed by investors. Excellent. Yeah. And that just sort of like, it's been really interesting. Even if you think about all the investors that are on our platform investing in these deals, so many of them are angel investors and are in the tech industry. And it's just been so incredible to see how welcoming folks have been because I think people realize it. And for so long, we just associated brick and mortar as being a bad investment. And what Bonside comes in and says is, yeah, maybe it's not the right equity investment all the time, but that doesn't mean it's a bad business. It just means it's not an equity investment. Yeah. So let's rethink the vehicle and we can show you how this is a good investment.
So cool. Well, I would love to get into specifics. So can you tell us more about the current product and when you mentioned angel investors are buying in? So can you talk more about, you said repeat, but the repeat revenue agreement and what Bonside is offering to small businesses right now?
Yes. So the way that we work is our fundamental thesis is that you have to rethink the vehicle that is backing these businesses. And what these businesses have is stable cash flows. They have revenue every month, they have strong margins, and they have staying power in that they are brick and mortars that exist there. And so what we do is rather than saying, we'll give you $250,000 in exchange for 2% of your business, we say, we'll give you $250,000 in exchange for 2% of your sales. And we'll collect a percentage of your sales, not in perpetuity, but up until you return 1.5x, 1.6x, depending on your business. And then at that point, we're done. And the faster you grow, the faster you hit that 1.6x, the faster we're out of your hair. And so what we do today is we sign those agreements with the business. We spend a ton of time diligencing. We only bring in the best of the best brick and mortar. And then we present them on our platform. And we have a bunch of accredited investors who participate in these deals. So check size minimum is 10K. You come in and you pick a deal. You put in 10K and then starting exactly the next month. So if you would invest on November 15th, starting December 1, you receive monthly payouts from the business. So you'll receive your pro rata percentage of revenue from the business up until you hit back the return profile that we agreed to, in this case, 1.6x.
Super.
Yeah, it's super simple. It's meant to be really intuitive for the business owner, but also for the investor. Honestly, I think it's for some investors like addicting in some ways because every month you get a paycheck from Bonside, which is pretty cool.
I mean, you definitely should go to VC investors because we're used to not seeing money for 10 years. So like, I think that's why it's addicting. That's a great first market. It's like, wow, we get a real return every month. And everyone's looking for passive income, especially in this economy. So actually, I'm curious, how do you think about, the macro environment and the doom and gloom headlines, potential recession? How does that affect your kind of this $12 trillion opportunity and your lens of brick and mortar?
Yeah. So I would say first and foremost, the way that we price the way that we sort of structure our instrument is we set the terms such that we can handle dips in the business and cyclicality of the business as well. And so even if they see a drop in their overall sales, but they're also growing footprint from the moment that we've underwritten them, you are either still on track to make your repayment on schedule, or you're going to still make your repayment and maybe it's pushed out 2 months than we originally underwrote. In most cases, our underwriting is quite conservative, so you're getting paid back regardless, and we can afford a dip in revenue. And so knowing that we have this coming, we've been thoughtful in sort of how we price the instrument. And what we fortunately have is pandemic data, which is when these brick and mortar businesses were forced to be closed, as sort of like, worst case scenario of what does it look like when your doors are physically shut. I would say the second thing that we do is we are really thoughtful about the industries that we back. So we are brick and mortar services. We aren't going to do a clothing store or like consumer goods. What we prefer is basically the sniff test is, can you buy it on Amazon? So you can't buy a haircut on Amazon. You can't buy a fresh cup of coffee on Amazon, but you can buy a pair of jeans on Amazon. Right. And so we've chosen that niche for staying power. But as a result, it happens to also be more inelastic in a recession as well.
Super interesting. Okay. You've clearly thought of everything. Your Bane modeling days are coming back to the forefront. Amazing. I guess the other thing I'm curious is, so you talked about the kind of business side. Can you talk more about the actual platform? And I love, by the way, that the entry point is 10K. So to me, 10K is when you think about angel investing. So it's probably, it's like an attainable price for an entry point for average people to come in. So yeah, how have you been actually pitching Bonside to any, accredited investors to actually participate on the platform? Are there any marketing hacks you've used? I know you launched pretty recently. So how has that journey been so far, your initial go-to-market?
Yeah. We've been incredibly lucky that it's all word of mouth driven right now. I wouldn't say lucky. We put in the work to ensure that it's word of mouth driven. I think what I leaned on a lot in sort of thinking about how do we bring investors to the platform was what I learned from building Glossier and Glowbar, in building Glowbar and being at Glossier, which are two just really great consumer brands. And there is something around, if you just create something that is so delightful and you present it in a way that's really delightful, then people will want to be a part of it. And it's been really awesome to see that with investors. What we do is we made the experience really simple, and we made our value props to investors really simple. And so people are just intrigued and they want to be a part of it. So they sign up, and then we get on the phone with them and we share with them sort of what we're doing, how we're doing it. The value prop that I basically explained to you up until now in terms of the types of businesses that we're going after. Maya, you could be really backing the local businesses that are in your locality. You're improving your economy in a way that's actually financially responsible. Mm-hmm. Really kind of telling investors sort of all the reasons they should be doing this. But generally they find us through word of mouth. I think the biggest thing that helps is the monthly payouts. It's every month I give you a reason to think about us. And then at some point they come up in conversation. Yeah. I actually had a moment last night where I was telling a friend, obviously I have a million reasons to talk about Bonside, but I got my email that was talking about my payout from last month. And I was honestly, bias aside, this is so cool that I'm getting these monthly payouts. I was you should join the platform. And I was I'm not just saying this because it serves me well for you to do so, but I just think you would like it.
Yeah. I mean, I work a lot in crypto. So as all these tokens crash and everything's kind of blowing up, the idea of recurring revenue is and passive income is just so, it's the dream, I think, for any investor right now. So
totally. And it's rooted in something real, tangible, a physical store that you can walk by.
Exactly. Well, okay. So can you tell us more about, you've had a bunch of different chains and, consumer businesses, they're all brick and mortar, but you've had different types of businesses on the platform so far. Are you allowed to share more about those and the types of companies that are on platform if you become an investor?
Yes, I can share the type, the industries. Okay. We don't share the business names right now because, and honestly, this is more because I think it's funny that a lot of crowdfunding sites do, and I just think it's funny because it's not you're not diligencing a business and announcing to the world that you're diligencing the business. Right. So similarly, when we're raising funds for the business, we're not going to announce to the world, it's not this open source that anyone can jump into. And we really only want to announce them when we're ready to announce them in a way that's like packaged and portfolio-esque.
Right,
So
elevating them also. Like you don't want
we're elevating them.
You don't want to blow up someone's spot, and or they're growing really quickly in stealth, and you don't want their competition to know. So I respect that totally.
Yeah, totally. So anyway, what we've done to date, or the types of businesses we generally do are, we'll do health and wellness, which is like spas, etc. Boutique fitness, so any sort of like workout studio. We do like the healthcare angle of like dental clinics, med spas, etc. And then we do pet care. So like pet boarding, pet health, and then cafes and restaurants.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I remember seeing a matcha, like a quick, rapidly growing matcha business. So
yeah,
super interesting. Yeah, I mean, it feels like you have all the answers solved. It feels like you're very confident, and it's just about now spreading the word on the business. And so, yeah, I wonder what's going to be your next biggest roadblock, because it sounds like you have everything figured out.
I certainly don't. I think we just have really ambitious goals going into next year of how we want to shape the future of brick and mortar. And it requires, to your earlier point, doing it the startup way. Of there's no roadmap for what we're trying to do. And it's just going with gut and having conviction behind that and pushing forward. Obviously leveraging data where you can and making those decisions and looking at where mistakes have been made in the past. But I think like every day is a roadblock, right? We're doing something that's never been done before. Mm-hmm. And so there's no obvious answer to any question that we have. And so, I think roadblocks come up daily.
Yeah, that's true. Part of being an entrepreneur. So since this is Dosa Dao, I wanted to kind of bring it back. You're obviously South Asian, and I'll blow up your spot. Neha's like one of the best dancers I've ever met. So she grew up doing, yes, she is. And anyone that's seen her dance, I wish we could link up a YouTube video, but you would agree with me. But yeah, I'd love to hear more about just your upbringing and how, your identity as being South Asian help or hurt or taught you something, or if you find yourself bringing that into the way you work. I think there's a lot of things from our childhood and our culture that seep into the way we think about work and professional life, and it's always fun to reflect on. So yeah, would love to hear like any stories or examples of how the culture's influenced you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different directions that this can go in because there's so many ways. I'll pick out like two big themes. One is, I think I actually wonder like which way audience skews, but I think as South Asians, we are, whether it's by our community, our parents, our upbringing, are just held to a really high standard in terms of how you perform, and you want to, get the best grades, go to the best schools, get the best job, and you're constantly achieving for the best. And I knew growing up, like I was like, I'm not on paper the person that's going to get the best of everything. Like I'm not, like there are Indians that are far smarter than I am. I am not the smart Indian that I don't fit that smart Indian box. Like there was just sort of like, I just knew that about myself. And I think the broader community like didn't think that of me either. I remember I had one auntie like come up to me being like, "You got into Northwestern? Like, what was your SAT score?" And I was like, "You can't say that. Like, can you just say congratulations and move on?"
Make them all rue the day. Now they're seeing like you have multiple businesses and like all over the internet.
No, I'm sure they're just like, "Ooh, yikes."
I think my favorite story, not to crazy, someone was saying, I think at your wedding or somewhere, somebody was like, "Oh, are you still doing facials?" And I'm like, "Oh my god."
Oh my god, yeah. Someone was like, "Are you?" I've gotten this like a few times since. Like, no, I was at a wedding, and they were asking me questions, and I was like, just to be clear, I'm not doing the facials, and I know like that, not a knock. I was just like, like my role was different there, and they were like, "Oh," and I was like, "Okay, like this is very, very different from what you had in mind." But what I was going to say was, yeah, I wasn't like your cookie cutter Indian. And I honestly think like that's actually made me more comfortable now of, okay, I don't need to be the smartest person in the room. That's fine. Like I just like, I'm gonna figure this out and I'm gonna problem solve the hell out of it and I'm gonna be just fine. Like I don't need to feel insecure about like IQ relative
Right.
to someone else that's going after and chasing something. So I think that was just like learned early on because yeah, you're just constantly pinned up against people like from when you're younger. And so my parents were fortunately really great about that, but I just think the broader community less so. Um, and then dance, I feel like was such a big one of like performing.
Yeah.
And I feel like so much of being in business is like oftentimes like method acting. And so I think growing up dancing just teaches you how to like put on different skins and yeah, and show up that way.
That's such a good point because I feel, and maybe the draw is, I was telling somebody yesterday that a lot of, at least like a lot of the first gen kids, one of my friends who like is, like grew up very standard American upbringing, and I was trying to explain the like annual Diwali shows and how every single person that's brown had to participate from like age 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Whether or not you knew how to dance, like you were put on a stage. And so I'm wondering what that, I mean, you're so right that a lot of business is sales and storytelling and being confident when you're not and everything's falling apart, but like having to deliver or adjusting for your audience to close the deal.
Yeah.
So that's such a good point. Maybe like the dance background. And the dance background and your Bain background, what I'm getting from this interview is that you should be like a spokesperson for Bain because they've really shaped your
They
career
did.
there.
I have so much. I think Bain's the best place to start your career. I have so much
So
gratitude for
cool.
that place. I think it's yeah, one of the best things ever.
Okay, you should have like a referral commission. Um, okay, let me just see if there are any questions from the audience. How do I do this? Let's see. Oh man. All right, I'm having some tech difficulties, so that's okay. Well, yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up. I mean, I would love to kind of, well, the last question, which is fun, is like, what's your favorite South Asian dish? Could be anything. Doesn't have to just be Indian food, but what's your favorite thing to eat? Like, what do you crave?
Honestly, dosa. Like I could eat dosa all day long. And my mom, I'm South Indian, so every time I go home, my mom makes them for me at least once a day.
Oh my God, so good. Well,
I know. And she also gets really creative with the batter now, where she'll make it out of, because I'm annoying, she'll make it out of quinoa, she'll make it out of rice, and she'll be like, "It's an oil-free quinoa dosa," and I'm like, "Perfect."
oh my God.
I
Well,
know.
you are in the perfect live stream because this is literally called Dosa Dao. Well,
Just
thank
end
you.
with you delivering fresh dosas to my apartment.
Yes, I didn't even know you were in New York. We should
Oh
we
my
should meet
gosh, my
up.
dosa's here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's the that
That's the
is,
softball.
yeah, pretty much. Well, okay, thank you so much, Neha. This has been amazing. I'm super excited for Bonside and all of your future businesses because I don't think this will be the first or the last, I guess. So thanks so much for your time. And everyone that's listening, you need to check out Bonside because you get passive income. And in today's world, that is very much needed. And Neha's doing the Lord's work helping this out. Oh,
Yes.
sorry, I have two questions that just came in, so I want to take them if you don't mind, if you have 2 minutes. Um, so, one person asked, as a female, are there any pieces of advice for other female founders?
Good question. I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this.
I can chime
I
in.
think,
Yeah.
what were you saying?
I was like, I can chime in as well.
Yeah. I feel like I would say just be aware that you are disadvantaged. oftentimes by being a female founder. I feel it all the time. But think about the things that you can do to work against to sort of like work against the ways in which you're disadvantaged. I think that's a more productive use of time than feeling slighted by the fact that you're disadvantaged. And so generally what I do is I'm thoughtful around how I talk about things and how I help build conviction in the person I'm talking to in my expertise. I know that sort of when I enter a room, like the assumption is that I'm not going to have in-depth knowledge about what I'm talking about, or that I might not be a linear thinker. And so I go out of my way to ensure that I speak in a linear manner and I convey my ideas with a level of expertise. The unfortunate part about that is it might not be authentic to how you actually act and operate, but I think sometimes there's less wiggle room.
Yeah. It's part of the show, the sales show that you were trained to do from dance. No, I think that's a really good point. What I really liked about what you said earlier was you used the phrase specifically, I just pull up my seat at the table. And I think that's what being like a female in any sort of male dominated industry is like, you don't really need to ask for permission. You don't need to overthink, hey, I'm a female or I might be disadvantaged. You just pull up. You like pull up and execute and out execute. And at the end of the day, bias aside, if you're determined and you have conviction and you work really hard and you almost like pretend it doesn't, you almost just like have blinders on, I guess is the saying. You can pull up your seat and people just have to listen to you.
Totally.
So I really like
blinders on. And like, I also like study people a lot. Like I like really pay attention to how the person who is being listened to, whether they be a successful female or male, how are they conducting themselves? So I do a lot of like studying people, which is like kind of creepy, but like if I'm talking to someone that I'm like nervous about the conversation, I'll find YouTube videos of them so I can understand how they talk and carry themselves.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love that. That's a really good practical hack. Okay. I think we'll again so much for joining this and can't wait for everyone to see it and share with everyone.
Adios. Thanks for this awesome conversation. You rock.
All right. Bye.
Bye.